This is John Nugent.
I'm Ron Peters.
And I'm Sam Long.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
after class. Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. I was eating lunch in the cafeteria today, as I'm wont to do, and an interesting conversation arose, as is wont to do. And I thought I'd get your all's input on it. And the question is this. It's a duel. What is the best Pop-Tart flavor? And if that's not the same as your favorite Pop-Tart flavor. I don't know why it wouldn't be the same answer, but, that's always possible. Pop-Tarts, they've been around forever. They've changed a little bit. So favorite/best Pop-Tart flavor, Ron.
I'm staring at the recording over here, so... No, sorry about that. I was a little bit distracted. I wanted to make sure everything was recording properly. Here's the problem. Pop-Tarts have virtually no nutritional value whatsoever. And so I have been avoiding them
for get my fruit.
Decades. But as long as we're going to have this conversation, to me, Pop-Tarts are just basically sweet treats, So
Great breakfasts.
Yeah, you may as well be eating a donut or whatever. Donuts might have more nutritional
Let's go.
value.
What's the flavor? Come on.
Gosh. My gosh. I know, right? So one of my favorite flavors is blueberry. So It's got to be blueberry. The most artificial probably of all the flavors that you're going to get in a Pop-Tart, because there's nothing blueberry about it. But I'm going to put it out there. That would be like the best, and certainly my choice, my go-to would be a blueberry Pop-Tart.
That's funny. My son was at the table. That was his top, which was surprising to me. But
really?
Yeah.
Why did I have the same pick?
Well, it's the fake flavor. So yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, and you got to have like the colorful sprinkles on top,
of course,
just to make it visually stimulating.
Yeah, well, the colorful sprinkles is a big part for me because they have them with or without the white frosting.
Yeah,
with the sprinkles. So I'm a fan of with the white frosting and sprinkles, and cherry, with a very close second. Are we allowed to say close seconds? Because I had to go back and forth a little bit, but I don't want to necessarily
steal mine, probably. But yeah,
close second is the apple.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, big fan of the cherry. That'd be top 3 for me. But for me, it's easily, hands down, cinnamon brown sugar. It's delicious.
That may be the one I'm thinking about.
That
I called apple. Yeah,
but it's got to be warmed. The cold is no good.
Absolutely.
But when you warm it up and put that, it's delicious. And sure, it's a desserty thing. That's fine. Those and cherry's good. Raspberry,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Was the cinnamon brown sugar.
So good.
Called it apple, but.
Well, and we all agree that you got to have like the frosting top. Like if you don't have the frosting top on it, it's like, why are you eating that? Because it is dessert for breakfast. So let's just like dessert it up as best we can.
Exactly.
Do you have a special way of eating your Pop-Tart? How do you eat it?
So
do you just
you actually are correct. I do have I break it in half, and then I get some frosting from the middle to eat around the edge. Otherwise, it's very dry and just cakey. So I kind of offset the cakiness with the middle frosting or the filling.
How about you, Ron?
Now it's all hypothetical because I don't think I've had a Pop-Tart in 30 years. So, but if I was going to do it, I think I lean to what you're saying there, Sam. If you're eating like that edge piece, that's like eating it without frosting.
Right.
Like, why are we even bothering with this?
Right.
And so you gotta like take a big bite and get like the frosting and the filling and everything in that taste there. So, but I would say, like, it's almost like you want to eat all the way around the edge. So, like, your last bite is that middle piece where you're going to get that maximum burst of flavor. And so, get the dry, cakey stuff out of the way first, and then save the best for last.
And that is my method. I don't break it in half. I go around the outer perimeter, and I eat all the dry, cakey stuff, establish a solid, non-sweet bread base in my stomach. And then it's all pure delicious frosting and cherry.
Absolutely.
Or cinnamon, whatever.
Brown sugar.
Yeah, brown sugar, which, that I was a latecomer to that one. I don't know if that's a more recent flavor.
I mean, compared to blueberry, strawberry, yes, but it's been around a while.
Yeah. Now, have you had this? What's your opinion on the s'more one?
I think it doesn't taste very good.
Yeah. I surprisingly don't like it. Like it's just. It was a nice attempt. I don't think it worked.
Yeah, this is getting way too in the weeds. But what's interesting to me is I looked up a couple top 15 lists of Pop-Tart flavors, and some are like brand new, never even seen them on the shelves. Sure, but whatever. There's not. I don't know. Is there even a peanut butter flavor? I don't think there is.
I've never seen one.
Me either.
Yeah.
We would probably, depending on how good the peanut butter was, gravitate towards that. But I just don't think this S'mores is very good. They've gone off on a lot of the Girl Scout cookies flavors. There's like a mint chocolate chip or whatever. Like, I'm good.
Well, none of us went with like chocolate or anything like that.
They're not good. It's not good chocolate. It's just gross.
Yeah, we're leaning into the artificial berry flavors, fruit flavors.
The chocolate might work in the context of peanut butter on the inside,
right?
Okay,
but I'm surprised they haven't explored that.
Yeah.
How many different flavors? Like, when you were looking it up, did you?
They didn't list all the flavors, but I think so many they've stopped making over the years. Like, who knows how many flavors they actually have? But I mean,
what was the original one? Like, what was the original?
I think strawberry was the OG.
Was it? Okay, I mean that makes sense. Strawberry's a very popular flavor.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
like
that
strawberries. So,
it's okay.
Yeah,
it's no cherry raspberry.
Right. Absolutely. Now, just because it's related, have your opinion on the toaster strudel?
So, okay. Ironically, this is how the conversation came up.
Okay.
Because someone said something about strudel. I said, oh, man, I used to love toastal strudel in the 90s. And someone said, yeah, it's not as good anymore. Like, okay, that's fine. But back in the day, that was so good. Pull a toaster, put your own little icing on it. Fantastic.
And so you're like more invested in it because you've actually got to squeeze the icing onto the top. And so like there's like it's a little bit more involved in the process. Yeah. I probably haven't had that since the 80s. So.
Me either. So, yeah.
I remember those.
So big fan of the strudel.
Yeah, I also. In the same flavor world of the cherry berry kind of things.
But the apple was good in that one.
I mean, any kind of, you get like that fruit, sweet flavor. Yeah, that's just
maybe that's
stuff.
where I got apple from, is from the strudel. But, yeah, okay. Well, part of the reason, maybe not on purpose, but we're talking about food.
That is funny that we didn't plan it that way, but it does dovetail nicely.
Way to make a connection, John.
We're starting a new series about food, and we've had numerous requests to do a series on the Lord's Supper, and for whatever reason, it just keeps slipping through the cracks. For us, it's an easy button topic. We are passionate about it. We've got lots of material on it, and for whatever reason, it hasn't bubbled to the surface when we're saying, what series haven't we done lately?
Right.
And so finally, we've been reminded, Faith, thank you very much, that we still haven't done this series. And so, we're going to go about that study, and just want to acknowledge in the beginning, this is a topic about which Christians some feel very passionate, and there are pretty differing interpretations of what the Lord's Supper is all about, or what's the heart or center of the supper, and what eating practice even constitutes the Lord's Supper, and who might participate in and things of that nature. So we want to acknowledge that. It's a sensitive topic, and we're trying to do what we do, which is to approach it biblically and holistically, with a desire to trace the passage to its origins, its original meaning, its original way of being practiced, while we're acknowledging from the beginning there's significant historical development in the way the supper is practiced, and the meaning given to the supper, and the interpretation of what's happening in the event. It's just, so we will probably, after we finish the Bible survey, dabble a little bit in some of the history of the development of the practice, and how we got to the place we're in today. And so that's what we're going to do, and we want to begin by grounding the practice of the Lord's Supper in what we believe is its original context, which is a shared meal context. I mean, everyone agrees that, the Last Supper is kind of the official institution of the Lord's Supper, although there's precursors to it earlier in the New Testament. It's just worth noting that that meal was a full meal in which Jesus imbued significance into the bread and the cup of that meal. And so one of the backgrounds to the Lord's Supper is, first and foremost, it's a religious type meal. And in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament, there were religious meals that are arguably precursors to the Lord's Supper. And we want to talk about some of those. So, Sam, kick us off.
Yeah, we're going to begin in Leviticus, my favorite, and everyone else's favorite, I know. And I think you're right, John, when we talk about the idea of eating together was so prevalent in the ancient world and especially in Israel. There's so many examples of people eating together, and good hospitality dictated when someone comes in your midst, you share a meal with them. But some meals had more, like you say, spiritual significance than just breaking bread. And we start in Leviticus 3, and there's a sacrifice, which, I think a lot of people when they're reading through the Bible in a year, they get to Leviticus 1 and 2 and they give up. But if you get to 3, it talks about this sacrifice of, it's a fellowship offering or it's a well-being offering, lots of different descriptions of it. And what happens is the offerer comes and brings a sacrifice. And what's fascinating is up till now, the first two offerings, it's either all burned up or it's mostly burned up and a little bit is given to the priest. But in Leviticus 3, it talks about this offering where you bring the sacrifice. Some is burned up and given to God. Some is given to the priest. And then the offerer goes and eats it and shares that meal. And so it's just this fascinating offering where it's kind of the context of maybe it's out of like, God has blessed me and done amazing things, and I just want to celebrate. And so you come and you have this sacrifice where you maybe bring your family together, maybe some friends, and say, hey, we're having a party at the temple, see you, and there's context of tabernacle. See you there. I'm providing all the food, and you slaughter an animal. And again, it's bringing God into it as well. There's this fellowship where God is present, where there's the spiritual religious aspect with the priest, and then you and your family and friends share the rest of the animal. And it's so cool because so often we think of sacrifices as like to atone for sin or to make things right. And this just seems to be, God's good. Let's just have a party. And it turns partying into a more spiritual religious context and reminds us that God is present in that as well. And so that's the first sort of, and kind of like you might be easy to skip over that example, but it's where they join together and they share a meal with God at its center.
I want just a clarifying question. When you think about Thanksgiving offerings, are they a subset of fellowship offerings, or are they a different kind of offering? And are they of the same nature when it comes to the meal practice?
Are you thinking of a specific Thanksgiving offering?
No. I've heard of the category of Thanksgiving offerings when I've seen a list of all the different kinds of offerings.
I'm not sure where they get that from. It's not really expounded in the text like that. I think it would probably fall under this category, but generally speaking, like there aren't a lot of sacrifices listed and explained. It's here in Leviticus, and that's mostly it. We're going to get to another one kind of here in a second, but so I would say, if anything, the supposed Thanksgiving offerings fall into that category.
Yeah, so they're assuming that the reason why you're getting together with this fellowship offering is because you're grateful for something and you want to feast and celebrate it. So maybe they call this Thanksgiving offering.
Yeah,
maybe
that's possible. They're conflating the two in some way, whoever they are.
Yeah, right.
The they. What I love about this is it really speaks to how Israel understood their relationship with God. That God isn't some, deity who lives far away, like on a mountain or at the bottom of the ocean or anything like that. But it really kind of stresses this sense that we share a meal with God. And here it is kind of celebratory in a way. It's like something good really happened. We want to celebrate it by having a really big meal. And let's not forget that God is a part of this. We're sharing this meal with God because we recognize that, whatever this well-being thing that we're celebrating, he played a role in it. And so it's worshipful that we're acknowledging God. Thank you for this great thing that happened. We want to make sure that you're a part of it. It speaks so strongly to acknowledging God's presence in your midst and doing these wonderful things and coming together and sharing a meal together. And I love the imagery of it. And it's not just an image. It literally happens. This is things they did. But it speaks so highly of Israel's very positive relationship they have with God in celebrating meals together. And so I love that we're starting here because I think it begins to set up this understanding of how meals function in the ancient world. And I think in many ways function to this way to this very day. I love talking about meals in classes because, explaining to students like, your best friends are the people you sit around the table with at lunch here in the cafeteria. In many ways, we're still practicing this stuff. As Israel celebrates things by sharing a meal, this is what we do. There's something about that sharing of a meal that creates this really tight bond socially. And it's bonds between people and their bonds with God himself.
Yeah. And what's neat about this one, and we're going to get into at some point Passover. I think we're going to hold that off until we get to the Last Supper, because it happened around Passover. But there are certain meals that they got together for overt religious purposes. Right? We're remembering this particular event of God's deliverance, and we're celebrating with food. The fellowship offering isn't really necessarily on the liturgical calendar, so to speak.
Right. It's
on the it's spring. It's time to celebrate Easter. It's kind of like things happen in your individual life, and you have reason to fellowship, and you get together people, and you go to the place where that is associated with the Lord's presence, because you want him to be a part of the meal. And I think it's his presence in the meal which makes this such a relevant precursor to the Lord's Supper, because a lot of the big question is, in what sense is Jesus in the meal?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something unique about the language of "this is my body." And when you get to passage about where two or more are gathered, there I am in their midst. Right. Like there's something about the Lord's presence in the Lord's Supper that's very important theologically in the New Testament that does have a predecessor in the Old.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you're talking about this idea, you almost envision where like someone receives a windfall and they want to celebrate, but they understand the windfall came from God. So they come to the tabernacle, to the temple, and say, God, because you've done this in my midst, I'm now sharing the blessing with my friends and family. And so like that's how God is part of it, because God's giving and all the credit, right? It's not like, oh, I got a raise at work. Nice job, me. And I was like,
right,
no,
yeah, exactly.
God's in it, and so it's giving credit where it's due, and I think that's one way they draw it back to God and keep it from being so self-absorbed.
Yeah, and kind of going to what you were saying there, John. For so many people, in the early churches, they're hearing these stories told or reading them once or written down. They have a context, especially Jewish Christians, who just have all these meals as a part of the rhythm of their life. Religiously, it helps them remember that God's a part of everything that they do. And so they can't help but read passages in the New Testament in light of those things that are just part of their life. And I think because, like you said, Sam, like we get to Leviticus and we're going, can we just jump ahead, to some of those fun historical stories, that we lose that sense of continuity. And that's what we want to do, is to help our listeners understand that there is a lot of Old Testament precedent that once you get your head wrapped around that, it's just going to make this New Testament stuff so much more like robust and just understanding it in a much more vivid way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about, and why I want to distinguish between the liturgical feasts that latch on to events in Israel's history that they're trying to remember, and distinguish them from the fellowship feasts, like individuals. Something important has happened. They want to celebrate it, and they want to celebrate it in God's presence with people they love and care about. I feel like the church has a lot of that first one of the, we have the Lord's Supper feast, and we celebrate that together, and some every week, some once a month, some once every year or twice a year. But when we have like personal accomplishment feasts, I don't see much in the way of let's get together, in the place where we associate with God's presence and feast together so we can give thanks to God for this. We do have parties in our home and we feed people, but because we do it in our home, which is probably where the early church would have done it, because they didn't have yet church buildings and fellowship halls to do it in. For them, there was a sense where their home was the place where God was present and where believers gather and God's presence is in their midst. But I feel like we don't associate our homes with God's presence in the way we associate church buildings with God's presence. And so we're missing the Christian equivalent of this practice, fellowshipping because of the blessings God has given us in a way that is overt about celebrating with God and the faith community and associating our celebrations with his presence in our midst.
Well, I think you're right, because I know a lot of churches, they will talk about their church building, fellowship hall, in temple language. And so people expect, where do we encounter God? We encounter him at this building we go to on Sunday mornings and maybe other times during the week. And so, yeah, this dedicated structure becomes essentially a new temple. And man, we lose so much when we don't realize that, God's presence is not in a building. You don't encounter God there. You encounter God in every aspect of life. And when when we're not meeting with homes anymore, the house definitely is no longer a place to encounter God. It's not even just a place to encounter God, but to invite other people in where they too can encounter God and experience all the goodness of kingdom life, around the table. And so, yeah, I've been in churches where the church building becomes like a new temple. And I'm like, I don't think that that's a very good use of that language. But it like I said, I think it pulls us back away from the kind of thing you're describing.
But if we do view it as that kind of space, there's a reason not just to have liturgical feasts there, but some kind of fellowship offerings there, like celebrations that we're already having because we want to celebrate a graduation, a big raise at work or something like that, that those could be brought in the ambit of our worship space where we encounter God.
I want to make two quick notes. I got to nerd out before we move on. For those who are worried about gaining weight during this feast, all the fat goes to God. So, trim it off and give it to God.
The best part.
And then I want to say that Leviticus 7 expands on this a little bit, and it just talks about bringing in a cake of bread as well. So kind of a foreshadowing of meat/blood and bread, which we'll get to down the road. So.
Do they give any reason, or do you know a reason why the cake of bread?
It just says you're supposed to do it. Part of it is, it says, verse 14, from this you shall offer one cake from each offering as a gift to Yahweh. It shall belong to the priest who dashes the blood of the offering. It doesn't really say why here, but I will say there's possibly a doctoral dissertation that talked about bread and and the small offering of remembrance that's given into it. So that's all.
Okay.
It's mine I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And in case you didn't pick that up.
And its association with the priest reminds me of the bread of presence, right? In the tabernacle, there's bread that is placed there on a regular basis. And 12 loaves, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? Representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And
ideally,
only the priests get to partake of this.
Yep. Yeah, and I think part of I think the this is getting so far anyway of the bread and bringing in this little offering is that it's an easy reminder. It's an easy sacrifice to remind of who God is and what God has done. And so, like, by incorporating it with the other sacrifices, it's just that extra little bit of reminder that sometimes we as humans need.
Well, I mean, when I think about like meat and bread, though, like, meat is a special occasion thing. Like nowadays, we put it in our fridge, our freezer. Like we just have easy access to meat. But in ancient world, like meat is a special occasion thing. Like if you slaughter an animal, you got to eat that meat up because it's going to go bad. And so, meat is really a very much a special occasion kind of thing. It makes me think of like when Abraham, when he sees like Yahweh and his two angels coming along, he slaughters a calf. Because it's a big deal. Like, this is a big celebration. Versus bread, that's what you just eat all the time. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever number of meals you eat. That's like the go-to. And like you're bringing both together. Obviously, the sacrifices are that really, really special food that speak to God of this is a special occasion. But let's not forget for the everyday, sort of mundane food, there's a place for that as well. And so bringing both of those together, I think, is very interesting. Not to mention, sometimes you have like wine and oil in there as well.
Yep.
All right, so I want to continue to nerd out on this.
Sorry,
because a lot of times when there are offerings that are brought, it is accompanied with a grain offering and a drink offering.
Yep.
And is that because, like, people don't feast on meat alone? Like, people, when they have their meat, and again, it's special occasion. They don't have meat all the time, right? But they have their meat with bread, and they have their meat and bread with wine. Yeah. Like, so that the grain offering is kind of like, have some bread with your meat, have some wine with your meal, that these accompany other feasts to round off the meal, to make it a complete meal.
So practically, yes, but I think it's doing more theologically. So I don't know what your
What is the more?
So okay, so
Keep nerding out.
I know. So there's an azkara is the Hebrew word. It's actually from Aramaic word, but it's come from zakar, which means to remember. And so in chapter 2, they often call it the grain offering, but it's interesting that they call it a grain offering, but all the other offerings are named by their function. And so the grain offering is a misnomer. It has to do more with, in my mind, it's a memorial offering, that specific one. But then they take that memorial offering and they add it to these other sacrifices as well. And that's where I think they're bringing in the practicality of, sure, want some meat and potatoes or meat and bread, as it were, but also it's doing work theologically, not just filling our stomachs.
So it's interesting that the grain offering that's associated with bread, right, would be doing work associated with remembrance.
Yes.
I mean, for when we get to Lord's Supper, that's not
correct.
That's not irrelevant.
No, it's not. I should have thought of that in our pre-meeting. Thanks for bringing it up, John. Oops.
It'd be weird to have like this sacred feast where the meat is consecrated to the Lord, but then you're adding common bread and common wine. It makes sense that you would accompany this with remembrance, reminding yourself that it's not just about enjoying the great meat, but there's this grain offering, that remembering and connecting with the Lord and what He has done in salvation history on behalf of Israel and all Israelites. And the cup, without which you don't have a complete meal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, that grain offering is just it's like a Thanksgiving prayer. Like we can do that pretty quickly. Like, oh, thanks God for waking me up this morning. Thanks God for doing. Like it's simple for us, and that's what it's a simple offering. It's a simple quote sacrifice, and so it's easy for them to bring. It's on hand, but it's doing a lot of work for them, and so that's making those connections. And then, yes, as you say, we will have a remembrance idea with bread down the road.
Yes, we will. But I mean, it keeps God in front of you at all times.
That's right.
The mundane stuff. You don't want to forget that even in the mundane, the bread, the grain, this thing that we eat all the time, that's like the staple of our diet. Don't forget that even that is a gift from God. It's just keeping Yahweh in front of your mind in every aspect of life. And, it's religious, but it's really practical as well. Like it's almost like we want to sort of cordon off religiosity as separate from everyday life instead of seeing that all of it speaks to everything so that we never forget that God is a part of every part of our life.
Yeah. I think we've all had meals that are religious experiences, so this makes it a little more reverent.
Oh, that was so good.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, God, for that good food. Are we done nerding out? Should we?
I mean,
that
should be.
There are more Old Testament meals that are an extension of this. I think where we're going to read Deuteronomy 14.
Right. And so this has to do with tithes. People are familiar with tithes because most churches expect people to give tithes.
They're familiar they exist.
Yeah. I wonder how deeply people get into the tithes of the Old Testament because there's multiple tithes that we get into. But in Deuteronomy 14, beginning in verse 28, it says, "Every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of your produce for that year and store it within your towns. The Levites..." Okay, sorry. I thought it was a comment there.
We wanted to start
22 would be preferable.
Earlier.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, because I had 28 written down here. No problem. I can back up. So put in reverse, back up. "Set apart a tithe of all the yield of your seed that is brought in yearly from the field. In the presence of the Lord your God, in the place that He will choose as a dwelling for His name, you shall eat the tithe of your grain, your wine, and your oil, as well as the firstlings of your herd and flock, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. But if, when the Lord your God has blessed you, the distance is so great that you're unable to transport it, because the place where the Lord your God will choose to set His name is too far away from you, then you may turn it into money. With the money secure in your hand, go to the place that the Lord your God will choose. Spend the money for whatever you wish, oxen, sheep, wine, strong drink, or whatever you desire. And you shall eat there in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your household rejoicing together. As for the Levites resident in your towns, do not neglect them, because they have no allotment or inheritance with you. Every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of your produce for that year and store it within your towns. The Levites, because they have no allotment or inheritance with you, as well as the resident aliens, the orphans and the widows in your towns, may come and eat their fill, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work that you undertake." So a long passage there, but it sounds to me like what they're saying is, hey, every year you're supposed to set aside a tithe, a tenth of your produce, so that you can have this big party as a celebration. And in addition to that, let's not forget the Levites who don't get to do this because they don't have their own farms. Don't forget widows and orphans. Set aside a tithe for them so that when they show up, there's food for them as well. And it's, again, this time of celebration and rejoicing. So I always love it when that word rejoice is in there.
Yep.
Don't get so bent out of shape. It's like, oh, I have to give up this food for the poor people in my community. It's like, no, be happy that God has given you abundance. Like, I love that where it's like, God gave you so much you can't transport it, sell it and get money, and so that you can buy it when you get there. It's like that expectation that we're just going to have such an abundance that we can't even transport it all. So I love this imagery of a celebratory feast that we see here.
Yeah, usually when we think of tithes, like I'm giving this over to the church, to the establishment. Right. But you take it in order to have a party, so that basically you're furnishing your own party with the first fruit, with the first tenth of it, and you bring it. And so you're right; it is a great. It sounds like a pretty good time where a bunch of people are bringing some good food and having a nice time at the place God chooses, which ends up being in Jerusalem. And of course, there is provisions. If you live up in Galilee, you can't be taking a cow or a goat or whatever, 150 miles away. It's annoying. So just bring the money and buy it when you get there.
Yeah. And it's got to be a big party. There has to be just like people laughing and singing and like the dancing and all that kind of stuff. This is not a solemn event. This is a really, really good time. So I kind of wish I could be a part of this party.
And it's nice that they can convert it over to whatever they want. They don't have a legalistic, people think of the Old Testament, the tithe, they're so legalistic. It's just like, 10% of your stuff, turn that into cash, and then convert that to 10% worth, the same amount, spend on whatever you can get in Jerusalem that you want to make up your feast.
Strong drink.
So it's not
strong drink.
It's not a legalistic, has to be 1-to-1 or else God's not happy. It's no, the point is celebrate, enjoy. You've given your tenth. You've honored the Levites. You're in the other years. You're honoring the poor and making sure they can feast as well. So that's important. I think this does parallel. We use first fruits language, but there's also the firstling of your livestock in verse 19 that you also consecrate to the Lord. So this is another feast, right? That you shall do, you and your household, in the presence of the Lord, year by year, in the place that the Lord chooses. So there's another, feast that happens in the Lord's presence. And it's just establishing Israel was a feasting people. They feasted in the presence of the Lord. Those feasts had religious significance. They cause you to remember, to reflect on the good things God has done in salvation history. Very much background to what's happened in the Lord's Supper.
Yep, agreed.
So we're leaving Torah now and going to go to the prophets.
Sorry, Sam.
And just one passage from the prophets that stands out about, so Israel was a feasting people, and these feasts were not purely carnal and for health reasons. They were also feasts belonging to the Lord and feasts that bind the people together as a community. Isaiah 25 anticipates a feast. And so I'm going to read this, verses 6 through 8. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, of rich food filled with marrow, of well-aged wine strained clear. And he will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all peoples, the covering that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. Then the Lord God will wipe away the tears from all faces, and the disgrace of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. And this is a part of Isaiah known as the Isaianic Apocalypse, right? Was it chapters 24 to 27? And it's an apocalyptic section where he's anticipating the fulfillment of world history, right? Where there's peace all over the earth, and when the kingdom of God has come in its fullness, and death is swallowed up, right? This is an anticipation of the kingdom in its fullness, and it is depicted as a feast that is maximally inclusive, where we celebrate God's goodness. And this is just such an important passage as, again, background to the New Testament passages, because when we get into some of the New Testament passages, they're going to refer to the Lord's Supper as a feast. They're going to refer to the Lord's Supper as a festival. And it's quite possible that they're not thinking of feasts and festivals in general, but they're thinking of themselves as participating in the festival of the Lord that Isaiah prophesied when the kingdom comes. Because now the King Jesus is here, the kingdom is beginning. They might frame what they're doing in their feasting practices in terms of fulfilling this passage.
Well, something just popped into my mind. I feel like maybe we should have even talked about it earlier, but it's still worth bringing up now. Is that as like 21st century Americans, I think that we've lost a lot of the appreciation for how powerful feasting imagery really is, because we're just so used to having refrigerators full of food and all the storage in our kitchens and stuff like that, in our pantries. Like, obviously there are exceptions to this, but the majority of Americans don't go hungry. Like, we can get 3 meals a day. And I know there are people who do experience it. I'm not trying to diminish their experience or anything, but it's considered really such an exception when people don't have access to food. It's just such a modern thing, because not only of like material prosperity, but technology has just made the growing of food so easy to do. And in the ancient world, growing food was really hard. They had they had learned a lot about like fertilization and all that kind of stuff, but so many people maybe ate a couple of meals today, and those meals were so meager that to have a feast was such an exceptional experience. And like setting aside food for a feast was such an exceptional thing, because you just didn't have it. Israel, their subsistence life is like, we're getting just enough to feed our family on a daily basis. We have these storage of grain, but you got to be careful how much you use. And so the promise of an abundance is speaking to God, saying, you're going to have something that is out of the ordinary. And so the feasting imagery is really, really powerful, because they're like, yeah, feasting is just not something we can do on a daily basis. It's like Thanksgiving for us. Yeah, we eat a lot of food, but most people do that on a daily basis. We're just eating, more turkey and potatoes or whatever on that. And so I want to get that out there, because I think that for Americans, we can hear that idea of a feast and go, oh, that sounds really nice, because we get to feast all the time. And for Israel and for the early church, a feast was just so not their normal. It wasn't their normal life. And so I want us to appreciate the power of that imagery, to say, man, feasting is going to be more of our normal because of God's goodness to us.
Well, and I don't want to overstate the obvious, but there's a transition that happens here where all that we talked about so far is I bring my stuff to eat with God. But here it changes where God is the host and the provider of all. I mean, yes, he's the provider of it all, period. But now it's like, I'm going to go to the mountain, and God has prepared this feast for us. He's done all the work.
Yeah.
Right? And so you talk about, like, this bountiful blessing, but it's all God. Like, we go to God's farm and God's garden.
Right, yeah.
And he's pulling out of his stuff to give to us, as opposed to us bringing it and sharing it in God's presence. Yes, there's the acknowledgement that God blessed it and God helped it grow, right? But I've done nothing, right, except show up in Isaiah. And so I think that's an important distinction to make, that like Isaiah views it as like, it's going to be, you talk about all the struggle you've gone through, like barely making your tithe, right? And realize, if I give this tithe, is my family going to eat? That sort of thing. It's gone, because God's bountiful blessing that he's pouring out on his people.
Yeah, great point.
And this carries directly into the New Testament. I do want to hit its fulfillment real quick. Mm-hmm. If we can go to Matthew 8, verses 11 and 12. You want to read that,
Sure.
Sam?
This is, I tell you, many will come from east and west and will take their places at the banquet with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so Jesus seems to be referencing this big feast that, of course, the patriarchs are going to be at, and they're all going to come together and celebrate when the kingdom of heaven comes in its fullness.
Yeah, and Luke has a couple of passages like this too. I want to kind of get all three of them out there, and then we can talk about. So, you want to do the first
so
Luke one? I'll do the
yeah.
second Luke one.
Luke 13 is the one you're pointing at, right?
Yep.
We're changing up on it, so we're trying to get on the same
Doing
page
great.
here. We're doing awesome. So Luke 13, beginning verse 25. Jesus telling a parable. He says, once the owner of a house has got up and shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, Lord, open up to us. Then in reply, he will say to you, I did not know where you have come from. Then he will begin to say, we ate and drank with you and you taught in your streets. But he will say to you, I did not know where you come from. Go away from me, all you evildoers. And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, and you yourselves are thrown out. Then people will come from east and west, from north and south, and they will take their places at the banquet in the kingdom of God. Indeed, some are last who will be first, and first who will be last. So it's that same banquet imagery. I think it kind of goes back to that Isaiah passage. I like what you said there, Sam, because it's like same thing. God is not saying bring a bunch of food. He's saying, I've got a banquet, and all you got to do is show up. And man, what a blessing that would be.
Yep. And the last one, this is the longest one, and I'm going to try my best. When he noticed how the guests, this is, I'll just jump into it. Jesus, in the feast context, he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor. He told a parable. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place, and then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also, to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends and brothers and sisters or relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So he's grounding this teaching that's to come in their common meal practice and how they do celebrations together. So then in verse 15, one of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God. Then Jesus said to them, someone gave a great dinner and invited many. At that time for dinner, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready now. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of land, and I must go out to see it. Please accept my regrets. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to try them out. Please accept my regrets. Another said, I have just been married, and therefore I cannot come. So the slave returned and reported this to the master. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to his slave, go out at once into the streets and lanes of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And the slave said, sir, what you ordered has been done, and there is still room. Then the master said to the slave, go out into the roads and lanes and compel people to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner. And it's just this image for Christ. Like, the meal is a special human occasion, but the meal is also an image of the kingdom. And the kingdom dynamic of first is last and last is first should be present in your meal. And when God considers his kingdom banquet, people coming from the east and the west, people, the poor, the lame, the crippled, dining. When Christians are taught by Jesus about their banquets and their festivals, they're encouraged to make them kingdom banquets, like little foretastes of what Isaiah was talking about. He wants to see the kingdom ethic lived out in our feasting and in our banqueting. And this is all just really helpful, when we get to 1 Corinthians, and he's criticizing their participation of the Lord's Supper. It's because it doesn't meet the requirements in this parable.
Yeah.
Right? There is financial, social discrimination, and there are people given honored spots and people that are not eating much and going hungry. And these kingdom teachings are being applied to the Lord's Supper practice of the early church.
Yeah, and it goes back to Deuteronomy and the tithe. Make sure you're setting a tithe aside for the widows, the orphans, and those who don't have. That continuity from the Old Testament to the New Testament is just beautiful.
Yeah, it's not a truly religious meal dedicated to the Lord if social justice isn't baked into it.
Yeah.
So.
Are we out of time?
We're out of time.
Okay.
Right on the money, though. Good job.
Yeah, great job. Glad we got a Old Testament background. It's all New Testament from here on out, except for the Passover.
That's right.
Pretty significant Old Testament thing. But until then, thanks for joining us in this episode of the After Class Podcast. After Class because
the best conversations happen
after class.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the After Class Podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Social media pictures and descriptions are provided by Darren Harris. Audio mixing and editing is done by Drew Nyquist. If you've enjoyed this episode of ACP, you might also enjoy GLCC's Master of Arts in Practical Theology degree. In this 36-hour program, you will receive first-rate biblical and theological instruction from John, Ron, Sam, and several of their colleagues at Great Lakes Christian College. To learn more about this program, visit glcc.edu. Get practical and go deep at GLCC.